Hello and welcome to part 2 of my Warcraft World Editor tutorial series. In the last part we covered these tool palettes for doodads, units, and terrain. That should be your basic building blocks for being able to sort of set up, morph, and move stuff around and whatever. In this we're going to go over some more complicated things, which is going to be the trigger editor, which is F4. And you can open up the trigger editor. And we're also going to talk about the object editor, which is F6. So between these two editors, or these two tools that the engine offers you, you're going to be able to tweak and modify everything in the game. And you're also going to be able to set up quests, cinematics, encounters, effects spawning in units, despawning units, all these, everything. This is your whole network of everything that you're going to want to be able to change. So this part is going to get a little bit deeper, and it's going to be probably longer than the first part. So I'll try to be as speedy about this process as I can. So if you remember at the end of the last video, I said I want to make a single player isometric RPG. So isometric RPG means that I'm gonna need the camera to be locked to a specific unit. So let's go ahead and let's go over to the unit palette and let's get a super cool guy, just somebody who's dope. Here we go, we've got Mr. Dawnseeker here, right? So this is where he's gonna start. He's gonna start here. Let's go into the terrain editor. Let's create a road that he can follow, so that there's some incentive right out the gate. And let's create a little town over here. Some hills. So let's also put maybe some trees. And let's go to structures, cityscape, in order to find some buildings. And we're going to place one of these buildings here, maybe one out here, and here, and there. Okay, so a sort of peeve that I have with this game is that the buildings are not really accurately sized to units. I mean, if you can see here, yeah. It sort of looks like you're at like a mini golf resort or something like that, So it turns me off. So how can we make these buildings look a little bit more realistic and scaled? So there's two ways we can go about this. We could just make the buildings massive, or we could compensate a little bit in both ways by making this unit slightly smaller and making the buildings significantly bigger. And with this combined effect, you get basically a much better look to it. So let's go ahead and let's go into the object editor, and we're going to go into doodads, and we're going to want to go into structures, and these are the randomized building, but have no fear, we don't have to change every variation. Right over here, down here, we have the editor maximum scale and minimum scale. So if we set the minimum scale to 1.8 instead of 0.8 and set this to 3.0, now if I go over here and select one of these and hit page up to modify the size, you'll see it snap to the new settings. And if that feels too wonky, too ridiculous, you can come back in here and you can set that minimum scale back to normal, or you could just leave it at that if you wanted to. And then you can come back out here, and now you have a lot more leeway. And by the way, you do home and end to make it fatter and skinnier. And then you do page up and page down to make it taller or shorter. So now we've got far more variation that we can work with. We can make these buildings actually look pretty realistic, at least in their size. This one's, I mean, it's 3 stories, so I guess it should be kind of massive, huh? Alright, now let's go into props because the town ought to have some lights. Scroll down to torches. Get some torches placed. Okay, so we've got kind of our first little town to go to. So now let's go down here. Let's zoom in on our guy, and let's go ahead and let's set the camera to where we want it to be set to. So let's first reset the camera orientation. You do that by clicking the middle mouse button or the scroll button, and you'll reset the camera orientation. And you can scroll in or out however far you want it to be. I kind of want it to be a little more zoomed out than it normally is. If you press M, you'll go to the camera palette. Let's create camera. And let's call this camera. Let's go right click, edit camera properties. Let's call this camera player cam. Now, let's go into the trigger editor. So you can see that we've got this melee initialization trigger here. So this is basically what makes it so that the game boots up like, well, like it's supposed to, where it's going to spawn everybody and it's going to spawn their bases and it's going to spawn their people and, you know, set the victory and defeat conditions, and it's going to do this based on the event and it's going to do this in the event of map initialization. So I'm going to save you a whole lot of time, a whole lot of effort. Delete this. Just delete it. So that now when you go to test, and by the way, when it says this, just hit yes. Don't worry, these won't even show up. They just have to be there in order for it to boot up properly. So it says that there's this spawn location out here, but you can see that it didn't put a base there because I deleted that trigger. So it doesn't start up the same way anymore. But you can see, since this guy was placed under player 1 red, he's my player. So I've got some abilities, I can move him around. That's cool, but the camera's not locked to him yet. So let's come back out here. So let's go back in here and let's create a new trigger. Let's call that player cam. And I want this camera to lock to him right as the game starts. So let's go ahead and let's make that event map initialization. Action. And we're going to press C a couple times to jump down to cameras. And I'm going to want to go to camera, apply camera objects. So this is how you're going to set it to whatever camera you've created. So let's go back in here. Apply camera object. So this is where we're going to select the variable player cam. So it'll have the full list of cameras you've created here. Or you can go to select camera and you can click it. It's up to you. And it's going to set that camera for player 1, that's us, over 0 seconds. Don't worry about the timing, that just means it's going to do it instantly. If you wanted it to do it over slower amounts of time, well, that's getting more into cinematic territory, and we'll get to that. For now, just keep that at 0 so that it snaps right to our desired camera. So here's the thing though, it'll set the camera to this camera, and it'll be more zoomed out, but it won't follow him unless I create another action. So let's go to new action. Let's go back to cameras. And let's hit lock camera target to unit. So it's going to lock the camera target for player 1, that's us. 2, select a unit. And now it's gonna lock that camera to this character. And you don't need to edit any of this. You just leave that at that because we've already got the camera set to the orientation and stuff that we want already by doing this. So now let's go ahead and let's boot this up. So you can see the camera is far more spaced out than the standard Warcraft camera. And when I move my character, he is locked, or rather the camera is locked to him. So I can't move the camera away. This plays just like any kind of isometric RPG. The only difference is that I think you do have to target him. But so then you come over here and you can learn your abilities, and we've got this empty town. There's nothing going on here. Alright, so let's come out here and let's do some more. So, like I was saying earlier, there's this kind of combined effect that you can get, right, from making the buildings bigger and also making the units smaller. So hero units are generally taller than standard units, yeah, significantly so. If this bothers you the same way that it bothers me, here's how you can change that. So you can come into the object editor, you're going to want to go to units, and you're going to want to go find your specific unit. So I'm working with the campaign hero Mr. Dawnseeker. So in here you're going to be able to find scaling value underneath the art section. So this is essentially his height. So you're going to want to go over here and you're going to want to change this. So let's first give you some reference. So you can see him while I do this. Okay, so now let's go ahead and let's take this and let's scale it down by 1. You can see that made him a little shorter. For each one of these scale downs, you're basically going like about a foot in their height. So I still want him to be, you know, maybe pretty tall, maybe taller than your average Joe. He's the main character. So, you know, but now he's not, you know, he's not fucking Master Chief. And for some comparison, here's how he's gonna look next to buildings. So now that he's been shortened and the building has been made larger, this actually is a pretty reasonable size, especially if he's a tall, you know, like 6-foot elvish dude. So look at that, he can walk through that doorway 100%. Cool. So that's kind of the way that I do that. I like to scale the buildings up but also scale the player models down so that you get this sort of combined effect where it just looks a little more even without having to adjust either one too much. In trees, you don't really gotta change. I mean, the trees are pretty good. If you want them to be bigger, you can change them the exact same way I showed you how to change the buildings. That's how you can change everything. You just come into you just go into doodads. Oh Jesus. You just go into doodads and you come into here, you select anything and it will have this editor minimum and maximum scale. And also if you're confused about what you're looking at, just right click, select in tool palette, there you go, that's the object you're editing. You also can go into art team color and you can make it so that they don't match the owning player. So you can change the color of the unit. So say, you know, I want this guy to be owned by player red, but I don't want him to be red. I want him to be gray. If I go ahead and oh whoops, I set a different character. So if I do that for this guy, for Mr. Dawnseeker, let's say Snow. I'm sorry, I'm very tired. I'm getting loopy now. Okay, so that's how you can keep the colors neutral on these characters. So he'll still be owned by player 1 red. So if I go over here and I go to player 2 blue, and then I place another one of these units, you see he's still gray, but this one is now owned by player 2. So yeah, there's a lot of what you can change and stuff just in the object editor. And also, you can right-click on any item, destructible, doodad, anything. You can right-click on it, and you can hit New Custom Unit. So when you make this new custom unit, you can title it whatever you want. So let's call it Mr. Dawnseeker. And it's going to make a version of the guy we were just working on. The only downside to this is simply that when you copy the new unit, you do have to go back through these values again. So in order to make him, you know, the same height, we have to come back in here and we have to set those things back. So do keep that in mind. When you're going about copying and making new units, you do have to reset these values again. So if I go up here and I go to this guy and I go to snow, set him to that, then now this custom unit, now he's the same. So that's how custom units work. It's the same thing with doodads. You just come in here and you just go and you hit new custom doodad. You call it whatever you want, just whatever, right? And it's like word, there it is, and you can change it. However, in the doodad menu, you're not actually going to find a custom section. So it's just going to be at the bottom of whatever section you put it in. So here's my whatever. So yeah, that's kind of, you know, the basic gist of, you know, basically the trigger and object editors. However, let's go over one more thing with triggers while we're in this basic tutorial, which is going to be how we can utilize regions. So let's press R to go to the region palette. Let's go ahead and let's make a little region here. So let's say the player is incentivized to come down this road, and when they walk into this region, I want them to be ambushed by a few bandits. So let's hit spacebar to go selection mode so that we can click on this, we can kind of move it around, and let's go into edit region properties and let's rename it. Let's call it Bandit Encounter. And if you want to, you can also change the color of these. So you can categorize and color. So, you know, it's a bandit encounter. It could potentially lead to a quest. So let's make it yellow. So, okay. So now we've got our region and we've got our purpose for it, but we need to make it work so that when this unit comes over and walks into here, it actually spawns the bandits. So let's go ahead and let's go into the trigger editor. Let's make a new trigger, and we're going to call it Bandit Encounter 1. The reason we're going to call it that is because odds are you'll probably want to have a lot of encounters like this in your games. So this is just the first of many. So let's say new event, and you're going to press UU, and that'll get you down into the unit. So unit enters region. A unit enters region, select region, this region, okay, okay. New action, we're going to go into unit, and it's going to create units, facing angle. Don't worry about the facing angle, that doesn't really matter right now. However, if you do want to change this, you can come in here and you can go down to value from 0 to 360 degrees, with 0 being looking straight right, and that would be, well, I guess 90 degrees looking straight down, and then 180 looking off to the left, and 360 looking up to the top. So honestly, they can be facing wherever. They're going to turn to attack the player at the moment that they spawn. So let's say 3 bandits, and let's go in here, let's change them to bandits. So they're going to need to be neutral. We're going to go to cityscape, and here's bandits. So we'll click on that bandit, hit OK. So it'll create 3 bandit, 4 player 1, so that's not good. That'll just create 3 bandits that we can control. So let's set this to neutral hostile. So it creates 3 bandits, 4 neutral hostile at, oh, we don't want them in the middle of the map, do we? So let's go ahead and let's go in here, center of, select a region, and let's click on the region that we made. Hit OK, OK. So now it will create 3 bandits for neutral hostile at the center of the region we created, facing, yeah, that doesn't really matter. But again, if you want to 360 degrees, you can set that value so that they are facing a specific direction. That can come in handy in some situations, particularly cinematics. But in this case, we just want them to spawn there and just start attacking you. So here you go. So that'll create the units the moment that a unit enters that region. However, there's sort of an open end here. If I were to enter the region, leave the region, and re-enter the region, or rather, if I were to enter the region, the units spawn there, and they technically enter the region, this creates a chain effect that will just continuously spawn bandits over and over and over. So you're going to want to bake this into every single encounter or trigger that you make of this kind, where you want to come in here and you want to go to T, and that'll take you straight to trigger, turn off this trigger. So it's automatically set to this trigger. So now this isn't open-ended. The moment that you walk in, it'll create these 3 bandits, and then it won't do it again after the first time. So now we've got our player cam and we've got our bandit encounter. However, there's some other things. I don't really like the abilities that this unit has. So I'm going to change some of his abilities now too. So let's go into the object editor. Let's go to units, heroes, here he is. And let's go up here to the top where you've got abilities, hero. So let's go ahead and change these. So let's get rid of these. Let's give him something cool. Let's give him some chain lightning. And I'll give him a heal, holy light. And I'll give him a rain of fire ability. So now he's got some new abilities. And with that, let's go ahead and let's test this out. So we've started up. Camera's in the right place. It's locked to him. He's got the abilities that I gave him. So for this encounter, I think I'm gonna go with the chain lightning for this encounter. And let's just go ahead and let's go down there. And the moment that I enter this region, the bandits spawn. So now I've got my first encounter. I can fight these bandits and they give gold and experience. Later on in some videos down the line, I can show you how you can create vendors, how you can customize itemization, and even set up progression paths for your characters. So I think that'll just about do it for this video. So here we've covered a lot of the basics. As you can see with the trigger editor, it's actually pretty simple. It does get convoluted when you want to do some tricky things, but at the base level, it's actually very simple. And if you have an idea, I guarantee you in some way through the triggers, you can work it out. You can think of almost anything. It's pretty limitless what you can do with this. So in part 3, we're going to be going over some more interesting things. We're going to be going over how to make cinematics, which is grueling. It's a long process to make cinematics. We're also going to be going over quests, and we're going to be going over more advanced terrain and level design. We'll also be going into itemization, progression, stat balances, all kinds of good stuff that you're going to need in order to have your own RPG that really feels like your own. So thank you so much for watching this. I hope that this was helpful, beneficial. And again, if you have any specific questions that you want to ask, go ahead and leave those in the comments. I promise you I will answer that as specifically and as quickly as possible. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.